Hi, welcome back to Healthline. I'm Dr. Kevin Soden, and we're talking about living with disabilities. Loss of sight is one of the biggest problems confronting older adults. Carol Saylor was always blessed with artistic talent, but along the way, she's had to learn a whole new way of seeing. Here's her story.
I think I always had trouble seeing in the dark. And as I went through my 20s to my 30s, I became aware that I had night blindness. And then I went to college after my youngest child went to school. And I knew I didn't see the same way as everyone else. My vision was a little distorted, and my teachers would remark that some of my work looked like El Greco, whom I know now was also visually impaired. I knew there was something different, but I kept on with it. It took me 7 years. I graduated at age 39. I got a teaching job, and shortly after that I realized that I was losing my vision. If it's a gradual thing, the way it is with people like me, you start, say you avoid a dark shadow because you think it's an object. And one night, late at night, I realized that I was working on the opposite side of the sculpture. And I would even close my eyes. And that's when I started to catch on. It kind of hit me one night, the way things tend to do, that my brain was making a transition. And that I really was seeing with my fingers and my hands. And that's when I said to myself, I'm not going to talk about what I can't do anymore. I'm going to start talking about what I can do. It was an incredible journey. It was an incredible journey. I think if I had known when I started studying art that I was going to be blind, I could have never done all it took to get through, because I did it as a mother of 5 children. And I am so glad that I did, because it's so wonderful to have had all that. And I can still see a lot of the things that I would stare at as I was painting them or drawing them. I can see them all in my mind's eye, even though it was years ago. I see it all. I think vision is so much more than eyesight. I think vision is something that you have inside, and it has to do with your mind and your spirit. And my vision is better than ever.
Working together, the brain and body can accomplish amazing things, like Carol Saylor seeing with her fingers. We're here with Dr. Ann Kaiser-Stearns and Dr. Rebecca Haig-Tomley, clinical psychologists who specialize in coping with personal loss and disability. How does the loss of sight or hearing compare to other disabilities, Dr. Tomley?
Well, I think the loss of sight or hearing is such a dramatic change for most people. The loss of sight is the first, or the beginnings of loss of sight is the first thing that many times we're all confronted with as we age. But in terms of the impact in a disability, it's so dramatic that it can have a much more severe
Do they react differently to this kind of sensory loss?
No, the studies have not shown that they react differently. What they have shown is that there's a whole process that's pretty uniform among any disability, and they'll go through the same process.
Dr. Stearns, what do you counsel people when you see them with these kinds of losses?
To be patient, to be kind to yourself. It takes time to come to grips with things that have happened. We were talking earlier about the aging process and who does well and who does better or worse. Well, in terms of this business about patience, one of the things we also see in older people is that they know they have less time. So the grieving process is shortened. Life is short. I can't grieve the loss of my husband or the loss of my limb forever because I don't have so much time left to live. I want to live it fully. So that's a good thing that's in people's minds. But one of the most crucial decisions a person makes is how they decide to think about the future. When a loss first happens, we're devastated and we feel hopeless oftentimes, and things seem very dark. But as time goes on, we get little glimmers of what's still possible for us. And it's important to do a vivid visualization where you vividly imagine, where will I be a year from now, 5 years from now, 7 years from now? Not in a negative way, but in a positive way. What's the level of adjustment I want to be able to say that I've done a year from now? What's the level of activity I want to have regained? Those positive pictures we keep in our minds. And it's important to block out the negative, catastrophic sort of pictures that we throw up and to say, no, I'm going to visualize a positive future. I'm going to recover.
And to set strategic goals, to actually set goals for yourself and ways of measuring those goals, even for someone who's just working with mobility, whether it's walking across the room. That's going to be my goal, and that there's some kind of measurement and some kind of focus. I think of someone I worked with who went through a cancer treatment that resulted in the numbing of his fingers. His love was for creating stained glass windows or creating different kinds of woodworking projects. He volunteered in New Orleans rebuilding homes, where he worked with a young man who he oversaw him doing the work. He could not do the dexterity required with his hands, but he could oversee this young man and still gave himself the feeling of the meaning in the work that he had experienced before.
So it's using your special skills and adapting it in a different way.
It's absolutely crucial to healing to find what we call a sense of coherence. One can live with all sorts of adversities if you find meaning in them, as you were saying.
When Healthline returns, we'll find out what survivors can teach us about coping with chronic illness. Stay tuned.